Hey everyone, Greg from Outdoor Goyo here. I just came back from an awesome weekend kayak camping up in Point Reyes National Seashore, which is only an hour north of San Francisco. So I wanted to put together a short video, tell you how you can prepare and plan this trip yourself, and then also show some of our highlights from our experience. Let's dive into it. OutdoorGoyo.com is a free packing list generator to use on your next adventure. Just put your destinations, dates, activities you're going to be doing, and we create a custom packing list based on local weather, so you'll always be prepared. Within that list, we provide hand-picked product recommendations for any budget, so be sure to head to OutdoorGoyo.com to be prepared and stay inspired. All right, so first of all, where is Point Reyes? What is it? Let's get you excited about this area. So let's take a look at the map. We are just an hour north of San Francisco, and this is a protected federal land right along the coast. This is a very active place for wildlife and nature because it's such an ecosystem with the Tomales Bay on the east side and the wild cliffs of the Pacific Ocean on the west. There's tons of wildlife, from birds, elk, sea lions, seals, jellyfish, coyotes, bobcats, mountain lions, all sorts of flora and fauna. And then just going along the coast with a kayak is such an experience. You're getting into all of the elements. We encountered a ton of fog in the morning that we returned back from the trip, which is so mystical and eerie. It was really magical. But also you're gonna see a lot of wildlife. The birds in this area are amazing. There's buffleheads that we learned about. You're gonna see cormorants, there's loons, hawks, ospreys, pelicans, gulls, all sorts of animals in the area. There's a ton of moon jellyfish, and these moon jellies are super cool. People pick them up out of the water and play with them, but I wouldn't advise to doing that. They don't sting, but they are really cool how they move and their coloring. So just admire them from outside the water. We also had really cool experiences with harbor seals. They were all throughout the water and really curiously poking their head out of water, looking at us. And at times we saw massive pods of at least 40 of them we can see, and I'm sure there were many more underwater. So really cool experience, tons of wildlife and sea life out there. I also should mention something really cool about the Tomales Bay is they have what's called bioluminescence. So if it is a dark night with not a lot of moonlight, the plankton in the water glow when there's movement. So you can swipe your hand in there or a paddle, or even see fish that are swimming in the water. So that's super cool. You should definitely try and kayak at night if you want to see that. Now there's all sorts of camping that you can do in the area. It is really friendly to backpackers and if you want to boat in camp. So there are certain beaches that you can't get to by foot or by car, so you have to boat into them, and that can be a kayak or that can be a small boat or a sailboat. Today we're really just going to focus on boat in camping, and that's what I have experience with. We only did one night, but you can surely string together a few nights, and I think I have some good ideas of what I would like to do in the future for even a weekend or a couple nights. Also, one final note, Point Reyes National Seashore, the entire peninsula, does not allow dogs on the trails. However, you can bring dogs on these boat-in beaches. Now, if you're excited about this type of adventure, there are a couple things you need to do to prepare. The first is you need to reserve a campsite. Just like most places in California, you really need to prepare in advance and know when these campsites are opening up to the public. The reservation system is based on a 3-month rolling basis. So if you wanted to, for example, reserve a date in April 15th, you need to wake up January 15th in the morning and reserve that site. How do you do that? You go on reservation.gov, and there is a Point Reyes National Seashore site where you can look at all of the different boat-in options. Now, if you look at the map, you'll see that there's a lot of options. All of the blue dots are places where you can camp without any pit toilets, and you have to bring all of your water and you have to pack out all of your human waste. So you have to bring a WAG bag. Now, that may seem weird to many people, but if you've never done it before, a lot of national parks and like preservations have these systems where we don't want to leave anything behind, including human waste. So that is an option. And if you're kayak camping in, it's not like you're carrying it on your back, right? There are ways you can DIY a WAG bag, or the rental companies that we got our kayak from also provide WAG bags. You can get them at Sports Basement, REI, or any outdoor retailer. Basically, you're just double bagging your poop so that it doesn't spill anywhere. There are two options for having pit toilets. They don't have running water. None of these sites have running water. So you need to bring enough water to cook, clean, wash up, and to drink. The two sites that have pit toilets are Marshall Beach and Tomales Beach. There's no check-in required once you get these sites. For example, once you reserve on the website, you don't need to go to a physical location to check in. You can just launch your boat from a few different spots, and then you have to have the permit on you or your permit number. It also is advisable to keep that permit number listed on a piece of paper on the dash of your car where you're overnight parking. Now, there are a few options that have overnight parking. There's Tomales Bay Resort, there's Chicken Ranch Beach where we put in, there's Miller Boat Launch, which is across on the east side of Tomales Bay. And then on that same side, just further north, is Lawson's Landing. I would not go from there because the farther north you get, the closer you are to the ocean, and the waves and everything can be really treacherous up there. So if you're going to any of those primitive northern campsites on the point, just be aware that the waters can get pretty dangerous. So you got to know what you're doing. Now let's talk about where do you want to camp. I chose to camp at a pit toilet, and for us that was Marshall Beach. It was a really easy cruise, about 2 hours or so of kayaking from Chicken Ranch to Marshall Beach, and then again on the way back it was another 2 hours, so 4 hours round trip in 2 days, 1 night. You can stop along the way, think about where you want to eat lunch, have a snack, maybe go explore. The state park right there offers a few trails that you can check out. There's also Heart's Desire Beach and Indian Beach where they have some teepees, which is a cool place to stop. So be sure to check that out. We chose to have a pit toilet because we didn't actually have any WAG bags available to us. The other beaches are really cool. They are more primitive camping, so you just have to be aware that you're bringing all of your water and you have to poop in a bag, but they are exceptional, especially if you want to be out by yourself. You can make a fire on these beaches. It's advisable to do that below the high tide line so that obviously when the tide comes up, it'll wash away all of the ashes and debris of that fire. So it is definitely a lot more leave no trace. You can get the fire permits, they're free. You can get them at Bear Valley Visitor Center, and it's on your way up to any site that you're gonna be camping at. Just remember to bring local wood, buy it where you burn it. There's a lot of diseases that different wood brings to an area, and it's really easy for that to spread. So we don't wanna be responsible for taking diseased wood into these very sensitive areas. So if you are planning to make a fire, make sure you bring your own firewood. You are technically not allowed to collect any wood in the area. Now, this whole area is such an experience, so make sure you really soak it in and think about the opportunities that are around you. Point Reyes Station, where we picked up our kayak, is such a cool little town, and they have cafes and places where you can eat lunch, delis, that kind of thing. They had a Sunday market, and we went through and did some shopping for the holidays when we came back. There's also a bunch of oyster houses all along the east side of Tomales Bay. So if you did launch from Miller's, you could go over, get some oysters, and then go over to the campsite across the other side of the bay. Now, we only did 1 night, so we kayaked from Chicken Ranch, went up to Marshall Beach, camped, and then came back the next day. But if we did 2 nights, or a Friday night, Saturday, like a weekend kind of thing, I would totally want to camp 1 night, the next day wake up, go get oysters across at Marshall's store, and then come back, have another night on the beach, and then head back to Chicken Ranch. That would be really ideal. So think about all of those things in the area. Also, if you're at Tomales Beach, then you can do the hike up to the point the next day as well, which is quite an experience because you're on a very fine point with the ocean and the bay on either side of you. There's tons of elk in the reserve. There's a lot of whale watching, sea lions, and everything like that there. We went during King's Tide, which is the highest tide of the year. The Earth, moon, and sun all align in a perfect way to make the waters rise to their highest levels. So we actually we were paddling during high tide on King's Tide on the highest tide day. So it was quite the experience. A lot of the primitive campgrounds were completely submerged by water, and we really had to do a lot of questioning about where we wanted to camp, and we found out from the rental place that Marshall Beach was one of the best places to do that during a really high tide because of the campgrounds were a little bit farther up from the water. So be aware of the tides. Make sure you check the tide schedule, know the high and the low tide of each day that you're going to be out there. Make sure you keep a record of that so you don't forget. Also, make sure you know the wind and the direction of the wind and kind of look how that shifts throughout the night. I have an Apple iPhone, so I use dark sky, but however you get your weather, look at the direction and don't just look at the wind and the direction, look at the speed and how that is going to be picked up. Normally it picks up in the afternoon here in this area, so you want to make sure you're doing your kayaking in the morning, at least before 1 o'clock in the afternoon. There's also really windy seasons in general in this area. So from like March-ish to July, you're gonna have a lot more wind during that time period. So just be aware of that. Now let's talk about kayaks. I personally don't own a kayak, so I really needed to rent one. And because it was just my wife and I, they offer 2-seated kayaks. So that was perfect for us. We just needed to strap one to the roof. We went with a company called Blue Waters Kayak. They were great, super fun people. They were really helpful. They helped us tie it onto the roof. They gave us pamphlets that were laminated of all of the wildlife that we might see, a map with information about camping and little reminders. So it was super helpful to have their advice. They gave us life jackets, paddles, the kayak, of course, straps to tie it onto our car. If you do not have a roof rack, they also have foam pieces that you can put on the top of your car to strap it down. So they were super helpful and I would highly recommend them. There's another place along Tomales Bay called Tomales Bay Expeditions, and you don't need to put it on the top of your car. You can actually launch directly from their site. It was a little bit more expensive, about like $60 more for an overnight 2-seater kayak. And the prices range for renting a kayak anywhere from $150 to $230, depending on if you want to be in individual kayaks or share a kayak. All right, let's talk about packing list. What should you bring on this adventure, especially if you're not used to kayak camping? There's a few things that you should know. If you haven't been to outdoorgoyo.com, you can make a custom packing list there for this adventure, but I'll go ahead and run through a few things that you should be aware of for this particular trip. Raccoons and coyotes are really prevalent here and they're very mischievous. If you've ever been around raccoons in the campgrounds, they are super sly and know exactly how to get into all of your stuff. They can unzip zippers, they can do buckles. They're very, very clever. So they advise that you bring a bear canister, and that's what we did. We kept all of our food in a bear canister. We did have a small cooler with a zipper, and we kept some little jars that were empty and we thought were cleaned, but obviously they had some remnants on them. And sure enough, without us even knowing or hearing the raccoons, they came in the middle of the night, unzipped the cooler, and it looks like they probably just licked the outside of this container all night. But just be aware that those animals are there and you should bring a bear canister with you. Now, you're also dealing with the water and the elements, right? God forbid you tip your boat over, but also just like splashing, you know, there's gonna be a little bit of water coming in and around you when you're just paddling naturally in a kayak and getting in and out of the boat. So you wanna have dry bags to keep your stuff that you can't get wet, secure and dry. Now for anything else, bring some trash bags and bring some extra little garbage bags and stuff like that, and you can tie up your shoes or sleeping bag in those bags and make sure they don't get wet. So another piece of advice I would give is to stay dry during these colder or shoulder season months where the temperature is dropping. You can be hyperthermic because the temperature is going to drop to the 30s, 40s, and you just don't want to be wet. The water is really cold. So do everything that you can to be aware of what your boat is allowing to come in or out, where you're paddling. If you want to just do leisure, shallow paddles, then you're not going to get as wet. But also bring a change of clothes, put them in your dry bag, and make sure you understand that there is the potential for you to get wet. Now, if it's hot and warm, go ahead, jump in the water, have a ball, get as wet as you want. Like I said, also, there's no potable water, so make sure you think about, okay, how much water am I gonna be using during the day while I'm kayaking and doing exercise? How much am I gonna need to cook the meals at night, to wash up, brush my teeth, wash my hands, wash my face, whatever you wanna be doing on that trip, think about how much water you're going to be used and make sure you prepare in advance and bring it, because there's no potable water in the area. There's not even creeks or streams where you can filter water. It's just salt water. So bring what you need. Plan accordingly. Know there's tons of things to do. Be prepared. Stay inspired. Hope you have a good time. Let me know in the comments below if you have any questions. Happy to help out. Outdoor Goyo, out.